Uh, okay, I'll try to do that. 1 minute. Good morning, one and all. Hope you are able to hear me. Am I audible, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Shall we proceed?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. I am very happy to be amidst you today and share with you a few thoughts on the issues faced by the banks and the roadmap ahead. What I propose is I'll run through my session. The PPT, I hope you are all able to see that. And then I will leave the floor open. Then probably you can ask all your questions and I will answer them one by one. Hope this submission will be okay. Okay. Before we straight away go to the issues in the Indian banking, basically from the students' perspective, we need to have a clarity on exactly what do you mean by the banking structure in India, because the banking structure differs from country to country. Banking, as you're all aware, is a part of the financial system. So I'm not going to discuss the entire financial system. That is a total vast ocean. So we will confine to the banking structure because we are going to talk about the issues in the Indian banking. So when we talk about the banking structure, as you're all aware, the banking regulator in our country is Reserve Bank of India. And then under the Reserve Bank of India's control, we have two categories of banks. One is the scheduled banks, then the other one is the non-scheduled banks. Hello, madam. Not at all audible. Sorry. Audible. Okay, I'll try to raise my voice. Let me see. 1 minute. Sorry. Mic already earlier. No, it is. I have to. So this is the public sector banks where you have State Bank of India. Earlier we had their associate banks, they are all merged into State Bank of India and followed by the other banks. And then the second category we have is the private sector banks. So private sector banks, as the name indicates, we have the ownership with the private entities. Like you have, Karur Vysya Bank, Lakshmi Vilas Bank, Federal Bank. So these are all the examples of the private sector banks. And then the third category we have is the foreign banks. So foreign banks are the banks where their, what you call, their uh, uh, main office located abroad, parent organization, and either they have subsidiaries here or they have got a branch network. Like you have, Citibank is there, HSBC is there, my earlier bank, Bank of Bahrain, Kuwait. So these are all the examples of the foreign banks. And then followed by, you also have regional rural banks. As you are all aware, there are RRBs where they are started and, sponsored by commercial banks like, earlier Andhra Bank, State Bank of Hyderabad, they all have started regional rural banks. So they, if you look at the activities of these banks, public sector banks, private sector banks, and foreign banks, their activities are spread across the length and breadth of the country. Whereas the regional rural banks, they are confined to a particular region. Like, for example, you have a coastal bank, which is confined to the coastal region in Andhra Pradesh. Similarly, there are regional banks that are confined to few districts. So they are all known as regional rural banks. And then the second category of banks that come under the purview of RBI, they are non-scheduled banks. They are broadly known as cooperative banks. And then under the cooperative banks, you have got a three-tier system in our country. State cooperative banks, like you have, AP State Cooperative Bank, Telangana State Cooperative Bank. This is the bank where it is located in the state capital. And then you have district cooperative bank. That is in each district, like in Andhra Pradesh, 13 districts. In all the 13 districts, each district you have got a district cooperative bank. Chittoor District Cooperative Bank, Nalgonda District Cooperative Bank. Like that, each district you have got a district central cooperative bank. And then you have got the other cooperative banks, small banks are there. And then followed by primary cooperative societies, PCS. Primary cooperative societies, they are functioning at the grassroots level, at the village level. There are so many primary cooperative societies, more than few thousands in each state. So all over the country you have running into several thousands of cooperative societies. It is virtually impossible for the banking regulator, RBI, to regulate these cooperative societies. That is why these primary cooperative societies come under the direct supervision of the district cooperative banks, and the district cooperative banks in turn come under the direct supervision of the state cooperative banks. And then the state cooperative bank will come under the purview of the both Reserve Bank of India and also the respective state where it is registered. You also have multi-state cooperative bank, like in the recent past. You have the example of the very notorious or unpopular, like Punjab Maharashtra Cooperative Bank, which went for a toss. So this bank operates in both Punjab, Maharashtra, and also in Gujarat. So they are known as multi-cooperative banks. The problem with the multi-cooperative banks is that they are under the multiple regulators. What do you mean by multiple regulators? Licensing of these banks is given by RBI, whereas the direct supervision monitoring is done by the registrar of the cooperative societies where the bank is registered. If it is a multi-cooperative bank, multi-state cooperative bank, like PMC Bank, it is functioning in Punjab, it is functioning in Maharashtra, it is also functioning in Gujarat. Therefore, in all the three states, registrar of cooperative societies, they will be inspecting and supervising this bank. Whereas overall broad supervision lies with the Reserve Bank of India. So this is how the banking structure in India operates. And if you look at the current banking scenario, we find that there is an interesting development that has taken place. To just share with you, the last week data from the RBI says almost 8 lakh crores worth of funds are lying surplus with the banks in India currently, and they are not willing to lend, obviously, because the post-COVID, the economy has come to a very bad shape. So banks are now risk averse. That is, they don't want to take any risk by lending money and again having the trouble of running after the borrower to recover it, because the economy is now not in a good shape. But they have got the funds. What they will do? They have to make money out of it. So on no choice basis, they have invested these funds with Reserve Bank of India. 8 lakh crores worth of money last week they have invested with Reserve Bank of India under the mechanism known as reverse repo. Some of you must be aware. Reverse repo. What is a reverse repo? Currently, the reverse repo rate is 3.35%. So reverse repo is nothing but investment made by the banks in the government bonds, treasury bills, and other approved securities which are issued through RBI. Say, for example, Telangana government wants to issue some 5,000 crores bonds. Normally, they issue through the RBI. So RBI will be the issuer of these bonds, and who will subscribe? High net worth individuals, corporates, and also banks, because now currently banks are flushed with funds, so they have to make some investment. So they are making this investment with RBI. This is known as reverse repo. So the investment comes under SLR activities. That is a statutory liquidity, because all banks, as you are aware, out of every 100 rupees deposit banks take from the people, 18.5% of that 100 rupees they have to invest in SLR, statutory liquidity ratio. Under the statutory liquidity ratio, the classified or eligible investments are government bonds, treasury bills, and all, which happens through RBI. Therefore, when the banks are investing in the SLR through RBI, that operational mechanism is known as reverse repo. So currently, banks have invested in the government bonds and securities through RBI, which is giving them a yield of just 3.35%. And then out of every 100 rupees, when 18.5 rupees goes towards SLR, there is another 3% which banks have to invest in Reserve Bank or keep with themselves in the form of cash. If you go to the bank, you will notice there is a cash counter. There will be cash in that bank. So that comes under this minimum stipulation. Every 100 rupees deposit, 3 rupees of that 100 rupees deposit, banks have to keep in the form of cash. Why? Because every day there will be activity in the bank. There will be withdrawals, there will be deposits. So people will come and they want money back for their activities. Therefore, to meet the day-to-day activities and to have the liquidity in hand, as per the RBI Act, all banks of every deposit of 100 rupees, 18.5 they have to invest in SLR and 3% in CR. So that SLR operational mechanism happens through reverse repo. And then we also have another mechanism known as repo repurchase. So repo is nothing but it's a reverse of reverse repo. That is, in reverse repo, what happens? Banks are investing in the shares, in the bonds of the government through RBI. In the repo, what happens? If the banks are having some surplus or excess investment, SLR investment, they will offload it and they will take money from the bank. Currently, more of reverse repo is happening because banks are having surplus funds. They don't want to lend to borrowers, so they are investing in the security. When the economy picks up, what happens? There will be demand for credit. So banks will raise the interest rate. Still, people will like to borrow. And then what banks will do? They will liquidate their investments in the SLR and then lend it to the borrowers. When they do that mechanism, that happens through repo. So when they offload their surplus investments and they lend it that money obtained from banks to borrowers. That is why you find repo rate is always higher than the reverse repo. The reason being, in reverse repo, banks are investing in the RBI. In repo, banks are borrowing from RBI. Always borrowing rate will be higher than the investment rate for the banks. That is why banks borrow from RBI under repo at 4% and invest with RBI under reverse repo at 3.35%. Now, the problem what we have is that currently banks are paying interest on the deposits ranging from around 5 to 7.5%. But banks are not lending to the market. Therefore, they cannot keep their money idle. So on no choice basis, they are investing in the reverse repo, which gives them a yield of only 3.35% return. Now, the reasons for this, what you call this peculiar scenario is, it's well known, that is a declining economy. When the economy is declining, nobody is willing to, what you call, do for expansion of their industry. Corporates, they do not want to expand. And MSMEs, they have their own problems. Banks, they do not want to lend because they know when the economy is in a bad shape, if they lend money, they will be stuck with more NPAs. And as it is, the banks are having a lot of NPAs. And because of the post-COVID, the NPAs are likely to increase. And not only in India, there is the same uncertainty is prevailing across the world, global uncertainty post-COVID. So these are the current developments we have. And added to that, we also have, another problem in the last 3-4 years. If you look at it, the corporates have borrowed more from banks in India and also as well as from abroad. That's why in the 2020 January, United Nations, when they released a report, they have cautioned the government of India saying that, look, your corporate debt is increasing. So what is the danger signal or the red signal here? The red signal is that if the corporates, supposing when they borrow more, not only from banks in India, but also from abroad, and say for some reason or other, if they are not able to do well in the business, they incur losses, then they will be default. For example, you have this Anil Ambani's Reliance Group, which has defaulted almost all the banks across the world. And very recently, you would have seen the newspaper also, banks in China, they have gone to court. And in the UK court, they have decided 2 days back that, Anil Ambani Group, they have to pay this money. Now, the problem is, how will he pay the money? He does not have money to pay back. So, rising corporate debt sometimes will create problems when the corporates are facing troubles financially and they are not able to repay. So this is already we have started witnessing. So this is, another scenario we are coming across now. And then banks currently, we have a singular major problem is that mounting NPAs, non-performing assets. So what is an NPA? Bad loan. That is, as a banker, when I lend money to the borrower, if he is not paying the money back as well as the interest, then my loan will go bad. That is non-performing asset. If you look at the data, I'm confining only to last 2 years. I'm not going back to the old historical data. If you look at the gross NPAs, last year March, it was 11.2% of the total advances. It means if the banks in India, if they have lent 100 rupees, out of that 100 rupees lending or what you call the loans they have given, 11.2% have gone bad. So this is a big challenge for the banking system in India. And of course, in the March 2019 data says the NPA level has come down to 9.1%. I tell you what is the reason. The reason being that it is not that NPAs have come down. NPAs are increasing, but during this 1 year, NPAs have increased. But at the same time, banks could make some successful efforts to recover the old NPAs. That is 2018, up to 2018 NPAs, a substantial portion of that we were able to recover. More than 1.5 lakh crores last year we have recovered. Because of that, even though this current year NPAs have increased, the overall NPA position has come down. So if you look at the data, it also says RBI has released the provisional data. The total gross non-performing assets of the public sector banks, that is the government banks, and the total banking sector, that is all banks, scheduled commercial banks. When I say scheduled commercial banks, it includes public sector banks, it includes private banks, it includes also foreign banks. So you have, as of March 2019, only the public sector banks NPAs were around 8 lakh crores, whereas the total banking system was around 9.5 lakh crores, the last year NPAs. So this is, a bit disturbing and alarming amount by any parameters. Now let us see what are the measures taken by the government when the NPAs are increasing. Why we are talking about the government? For the simple reason, in the total banking system in India, public sector banks which are under the control of the government and where the government has a major share capital, this public sector banks total share in the banking system in India is almost 80%. Therefore, for obvious reasons, government has to take an initiative to recover the bad loans and clean the dirty linen. Now, the government of India, they have started what you call a recovery strategy with 4 R's. That is the main aim of the strategy is recognition, resolution, recapitalization, and reforms. What is recognition? That is income recognition. And also recognition of the bad advances. When there are bad loans, we are not supposed to put them under the carpet. We have to accept that bad loan, declare it officially. Once the bad loans are identified, recognized, and then we have to do resolution. What is the resolution? In the 2016, IBC code is, we have launched it. That is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, separate law. Under this law, banks can straight away go to that appellate tribunal and take the borrower who has defaulted to the appellate tribunal, and then the tribunal will pass a judgment giving the power to the bank to take over the management of that company which has borrowed and gone bad, and then the total assets of the company will be taken over by the bank under what you call a liquidator appointed by the bank, and then that liquidator will try to settle the liabilities and the dues of this company to all the creditors, including banking system. That is, we are trying to resolve the assets and liabilities and liquidate the assets and settle the liabilities. That is known as resolution. In fact, I must tell you that after 2016, when this IBC law has come, banks have got a relatively better mechanism to liquidate the what you call the assets of the borrower and settle their dues. Earlier, we had to go to the courts. You know, courts, how much time it takes? It takes several decades. So now, we have got a fast tracking mechanism, fast track under the IBC code. So once I am able to come across a borrower, say who has borrowed some 100 crores, he has defaulted. So I will recognize him as a bad advance. And then I will take him to the IBC appellate tribunal. I will do the resolution. And then supposing I settle it, I get back my money. Now, interestingly, let me also share a piece of very important statistical data as far as this resolution is concerned. The last 3 years after the 2016, when the IBC has come, the mechanism effectively started functioning in 2017. The last 3 years, through the resolution efforts, banking system was able to recover more than 2 to 2.5 lakh crores of bad loans. But the fact is that we have to make some sacrifices. What is meant by sacrifices? Say I have given 100 rupees loan, that loan has gone bad, I have gone to the tribunal and I have taken out the assets of that company, sell the assets and recover my loans and settle all other dues of outsiders. So when I do this activity, probably out of every 100 rupees I have lent, I may not be able to recover entire 100 because it is very simple. If I am able to recover entire 100, that loan will not go bad. So there is not the liability in that account will be more than the assets of that company. So when I do the resolution, maybe I will be ending up with recovering less than what I have lent money as the loan. So if I have given 100 rupees loan, through the resolution, when I recover, finally, that recovery, full recovery may be less than 100. How much on an average, if you make the calculation, unfortunately on an average, through this mechanism in IBC, banks were able to recover for every 100 rupees they have lent, they could recover only 43 rupees. It means 57 rupees banks have written off as the losses or bad loans or bad debts, what you call in our accounting language, bad debts written off. And this mechanism normally happens to large corporates like SR Group. There are so many other groups, Bhushan Steels. All these advances in the gone bad, Vedanta and all. Banks have gone to the IBC mechanism, made a settlement, one-time settlement, recovered whatever they could salvage and came out of it. And the remaining they have written off as the losses. So in a way, we are able to speed up the mechanism to recover the bad loans. In the process, we have to make some sacrifices. So that is something, you know, a negative trend we find in the IBC mechanism. We also have another legal mechanism known as securitization and reconstruction of financial assets and enforcement of security interest act, that is in short known as SARFAESI Act. The SARFAESI Act is meant for non-corporates, that is not large borrowers, small borrowers, where you know more than 1 lakh rupees loans are there, they have gone bad, and where you know we also have some mortgage of the property. Then under this mechanism, what we do, we don't go to court, we give a notice, and then after 2-3 notices, what we do, we will try to auction the property that is mortgaged by the borrower. We try to liquidate the property straight away and then try to recover the money. So these are the two mechanisms we have for you know recovery of the bad debts. Now currently, if you look at the post-COVID developments, what are the measures taken by the government of India and RBI? Post-COVID, you may notice that initially what the RBI said is that they allowed banks, you give 3 months time for the borrowers to pay back. Particularly, you know, the term loans. When I say term loan, it is a term loan raised by a corporate from a bank, or it is like a credit card loan, or it is like a car loan, personal loan, home loan. These are all the loans, they are known as a term loans. Term loan is where you borrow in one shot and start repaying over a period of time, like home loan. Somebody borrows a home loan from a bank for 50 lakhs with a 20 years repayment and monthly installments of say 25,000 rupees or 40,000 rupees. Monthly EMIs are there. So what RBI said is post-COVID, because of the lockdown, the economy is totally paralyzed, and these people may not be able to get their income. So how will they repay the bank loan? So, and that is not their fault. So RBI said you give 3 months extension. And subsequently again, recently in this month, RBI has given another 3 months extension, which means effectively for all the borrowers who have borrowed from the banks and where they have to pay monthly or quarterly installments, now they got 6 months time. That is for 6 months starting from March, April, May, June, July, August. These 6 months, if they are not in a position to repay the monthly or quarterly installments of principal repayment or interest, banks are not going to trouble them because the RBI has given them the exemption. Now, why this exemption is given? So that you know these people will not have more of discomfort, because if they have to pay, then they don't have income. It is not possible. So this is the 6 months moratorium starting from March 1st. RBI has given this relaxation to the banks. And then when the additional loans are not given, now the problem is that, okay, for the existing borrowers, I have given 6 months time to repay. Those who want to avail that option, they will avail. It is not necessary or essential that every borrower should compulsorily stop paying. No, it is an option, because if somebody is able to pay and if he is a wise man, he will not avail this option of not paying for 6 months. Instead, he will pay back. The reason being, as you know, government has said in the past, and even the chief economic advisor, Krishnamurthy Subramaniam, 2 weeks back, he made a statement, there is no free lunch. It means don't expect any subsidies or freebies or, you know, free money from the government. You are earning the money, you have to repay. And you have taken loan, you have to repay. Probably will give you some extra time, that's all. No more concessions. Therefore, if somebody is having money now, but he feels, okay, 6 months time is there, let me not repay. Then the problem for him will be, In the subsequent installments, interest on interest will be loaded and the EMI amount will be increasing. Ultimately, you will be ending up paying more. Therefore, the 6 months moratorium option has to be used only by the people who are unable to pay, but not by the people who are able to pay, but still they want to take this option because they end up paying more money back to the bank. So that is one thing we all have to realize. Now, because of the what you call banks are not able to give additional loans and NPAs are increasing, ultimately the bank's profitability has taken a hit. So many banks, I am expecting after the March balance sheet is prepared and declared, probably in the month of July or August, minimum another 5 to 6 banks will be declaring losses this year, according to me. Okay, therefore, how will we come out of this situation? Unless the economic revival takes place, new loans may not increase significantly. So this is the current reality. We have to realize it. Now, I will also tell you another interesting story. If you look at the corporates, most of the large corporates, say for example, automobile, Bajaj, or Mahindra and Mahindra, Telco, all these automobile companies, Tata Motors and all, they have another problem. What is the problem? The piled up inventories. Interestingly, last month, the entire April month, in Mumbai, not even a single four-wheeler was sold. Just imagine, Mumbai is the financial capital of the country, and for 1 month, not even a single four-wheeler was sold, cars was sold. Then imagine the position of the automobile manufacturers. Definitely, they will be having a lot of piled up inventories. They have a lot of cars manufactured, lying in the what you call the godowns or showrooms. Nobody is buying it. So for the corporates, the problem is they have already excess stock. So they will not produce more now because first they want to sell the existing stock. So what they will do, they will reduce the level of production or stop the production. So that is what corporates are going to do. Now come to the MSME segment. The MSME segment, they face liquidity issue. What is the liquidity issue? All these small, micro, small and medium enterprises, because of the lockdown, they have closed their factories or workshops or showrooms, whatever it is. Assuming the lockdown is partially or totally lifted, when they open their factories or the showrooms, then immediately their workers will come and ask for the salary dues, and their suppliers will come and say, my raw material payment you have to make. So they have got a liquidity issue. So they have a lot of dues to settle. So that is the problem of the MSME. Because of that, what has happened, job losses are increasing. I have data to prove my statement. The CMI, it is a very credible institution, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. It says the unemployment rose to 27.11% as of 3rd May 2020. Most of you must be able to recollect that in 2018, when they declared the data, that is the NSSO, National Statistics Survey Organization, which comes under the Ministry of Statistics and Project Implementation, central government, they declared at the time saying that 2018, the annual unemployment rate in our country was 6.1%. Now, as of 3rd May, this is the current trend. As of 3rd May, it increased to 27.11%. And if you recollect that 6.1% unemployment was the maximum in the last 45 years, then imagine what we should comment about this 27.11%. That is why World Bank has also indicated probably our GDP growth this quarter may even decline. That is, it may go to negative. So far, we have been having a growth. GDP growth is there. Even though the growth rate is coming down, GDP is growing. Like earlier, we were growing at 8%, came down to 7%, 6%, 4.5%. Still, there is a growth. But now there will be a negative growth. Probably next quarter, you may be witnessing -2% or -3% growth, which means the production level will come down because unemployment is also increasing. So this is you know, the from the corporate side and MSME side, the problems we have. Now, we also have the problems with the farming community. The farming community problem is something peculiar because recently the crop, they got very good crops all over the country. The food grain production, food crops, and you know, they were all very good. In fact, we have got almost 1 year surplus of food stock resource with the Food Corporation of India. So that way, agricultural sector, there is a surplus excess production. But unfortunately, farmers continue to suffer. The reason being due to the lockdown, they are not able to shift the agricultural produce to the market yards. Like you would have noticed in the newspapers last month in Karnataka, Dharwad district, many farmers who have gone for the grape cultivation. The grapes, after the cultivation was over, they were not able to move the grape, grapes, fruits from the what you call the field to the nearest possible location of the market yards. So it was lying there because no logistic issue, no transportation, total lockdown, labor is also not available. So they lost the total crop because it went perished. Almost 3,000 crores worth of grapes were lost in that region in that 3 month period. Imagine all over the country, there are so many seasonal crops you have, like tobacco, cotton, mirchi, turmeric. In Andhra Pradesh, in the Guntur region, tobacco, Virginia tobacco, it is very famous. 2 months back itself, the crop was ready, but unfortunately, the farmers were not able to sell because government did not give the permission. And now they are running to a situation where they cannot afford to what you call keep it in cold storage because they have to pay the rent. They don't have money, so they are keeping just like that. As a result of which, the quality of the tobacco has come down. So when the quality comes down, the market price also will come down. They are incurring losses. So this is the current scenario with respect to the corporate sector, MSME sector, and the agricultural sector. Therefore, unless you want to find a solution to the banking sector, which is not possible unless you find a solution to these economic problems in the country. Because unless and until the economic condition in the country improves, you cannot expect the bank's condition to improve. So both are interlinked. Now, these are the problems in the economy. Now, how do you try to find a solution? Basically, as you all aware, in academics, when we discuss about a solution to the problem, we all keep saying that you have to first identify the problem. First step. And second step is understanding the problem. Only then we can find the solution. Unfortunately, if you look at the measures initiated by the government, though they appear to be good, they are all mostly meant for the long-term solutions. That is what we call long-term reforms. If you look at that 20 lakh crore package now announced by the finance minister in the recent past, they are all meant for the medium term and long term. That is how we have to go ahead. But unfortunately, I am sorry to say that not much was what you call factored to address the current problems in the economy. What are the current problems in the economy? As I said, corporates piling up inventory. So you cannot expect now corporates to start the production because they already have a lot of stock. So that is ruled out. Therefore, MSME sector contributes to 45% of the production GDP growth in the country, 30% of the global exports, and 35% of the employment in the country. 11 lakh crore people of the country are employed in the MSME sector. And this sector is now reeling under problem. So this is the problem, and therefore the problems in the economy, if you look at it from the statistical point of view, GDP growth rate has been coming down from 2014 onwards from 7.3, it has come to almost 6.8. Now last year it is almost 4.75. Growth rate has come down. Now, as I said, next quarter probably there will be negative growth. That is more alarming. And unemployment, the other side, is increasing. Last year it was 6.1. Now, as of 3rd May data, it says around 27.11. So both are revealing very disturbing figures. Now, we also have NPAs that are rising in the banks. Broadly, if you look at the composition of the non-performing assets, bad loans, agriculture sector contributes only 8.5% of the bad loans. That is, if the banking system has got 100% bank loans, bad loans. Out of that 100% bad loans, agriculture contributes only 8.5%. Whereas the industry sector is a major contributor with 17.5% bad loans, service sector 5.7, then followed by the retail sector. So this is the composition, which means if you want to revive the economy, our agriculture and industrial sector, when I say industrial sector, corporate and MSME both combined industry sector and then the agriculture sector. These are the three major sectors you have to focus for the revival of the economy. Now, another disturbing feature for the banking system is that earlier I was telling you 8 lakh crores bad loans are there for the public sector banks. Out of these 8 lakh crores bad loans, there are total 38 banks are there, where we have got almost 10 lakh crores as of 2019. And out of the bad loans, if you look at it, 54.8% of the advances and 85% of the gross NPAs. It is contributed by large borrowers alone. It means the number of the large borrowers may be less, for example, 25, 30 like that. But the amount of NPA they have contributed is more than 3 to 4 lakh crores. It means more than 25 to 30% of the total bad loans are contributed by the large borrowers. Their number may be less than 50 or 100. Whereas if you look at the agricultural sector, the amount of bad loans will be less, but the number of borrowers will be more. Similarly, MSME sector also. So this is the composition of the bad loans you have in our country. That is why, many people say that the corporates, unfortunately, it started from 2012 onwards. Many large corporates, when they realized it, their accounts are not going smooth. They have a problem and they know they cannot pay back to the bank. There are two ways. One is, if the borrower is honest, he will go to the bank and say, look, I don't have money to pay, so you please give me some more time. But there is a second category of borrowers who are fraudsters. That is, they want to defraud the banking system. So obviously, many people have flown away from the country. More than 40 to 42 large borrowers who have run away from the country. And because of that, currently banks are having the problem, like, you have the Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi's. So we still have a problem with them, and we are trying to recover the money by selling their assets that are within the country. So the unfortunate trend is that of late, the bank frauds are increasing. This is something unfortunate. So if you look at the data, it says that the number of frauds where it is more than 1 lakh, it has increased from 1,500 crores to 22,000 crores, means 22 times it has increased within a period of 10 years. And out of that, 65% of the fraud cases, they are all technology frauds. Some of you must be aware, in USA, there are a lot of technology frauds take place. They hack the systems of the banks. SWIFT system also, they hack it, and they divert the funds transfer, siphon the money and run away. So in India also, unfortunately, the technology frauds have started increasing. And most of the frauds, they are in the advances, that is loans. There are also frauds in operations, like, somebody opens an account, he does not take any loan, but he will have access to the system and hack the system and ATM fraud, like that. They are all non-advances frauds. But the frauds we have in our country, unfortunately, they are all advances related. What does it mean? Loan related. So that raises a big question about the due diligence and the care exercised by the banks while giving the loan. Whether the banks are doing a proper verification before giving the loan to the borrower, doing a proper background check. That raises a big question in the minds of the common man. Now, the issues the banks are facing is mostly due to the decline of the economy. Unless the economy improves, only when the economy improves, banks will give more loans. When I give more loans, what happens? My total NPA percentage will come down because my total loan portfolio will increase. So, because of the declining credit, increasing bad loans and declining profitability, we are having the current problems. Therefore, now what must be done? We all can say, everybody will give suggestions. It is easy to give suggestions, but difficult to do the implementation part. So the suggestions go like this, like, GDP growth has to be increased. But how? Only GDP growth, production will increase only when there is a demand increase. Therefore, there should be an increase in demand. Only then there can be increase in production. Now, how will increase the demand? Unemployment has to be reduced. Only when the unemployment is reduced, that is, employment has to increase. But how do you increase employment? Is it possible really? Because corporates already have excess stock, they are going to reduce the production, probably retrench some of the employees. That is ruled out. MSMEs, they have got a liquidity issue, lot of debts. In fact, now MSMEs, many people, they are not willing to borrow more from the banks, even though government said you can borrow, because already they have got lot of borrowings, which they have to repay. Now government says, I'll give you 6 months time, you can borrow more. But the borrower will be really worried if he's an honest man, because I'll have to pay the old dues and also the new dues. How will I repay? The economy is not picking up. And agriculture also, as I have said, they are facing problems. Therefore, what should be the real solution? You please recollect, a few minutes ago, I made a statement. Unfortunately, in this 20 lakh crore package announced by the finance minister, there is not much to address the current burning issues. Now, I will discuss that and try to share with you the solution which I propose from my side. The solution goes like this. Some people have suggested, including, some chief ministers, they have suggested, government can print more money, they said helicopter money, and, give money to the people. Actually, that will not solve the problem, because if everybody is having more currency, what will happen? Everybody will go and try to buy more. But where is the production? No production. That will lead to hyperinflation. Money value will come down and everybody will suffer. Therefore, we need to create jobs and pay that money to the people. So I produce on one side, when I get a job, I earn my salaries or wages, and whatever I produce, I buy. Therefore, current problem can be addressed only when we are able to find a solution to simultaneously do more production, create more jobs, and then that will create more demand. Because when more jobs are created, they will get more income, that will create more demand. And when jobs are created, that will create demand. These are all interrelated and interdependent. Here where somebody has to build the cat, because the corporates, as I said, they will reduce production. MSMEs, they have got a crisis. Therefore, somebody has to take the lead and then others will follow. Nobody else can take the lead in the current scenario other than the government. And government has got the capability, government has got the infrastructure, government has got the funds also. And there is an opportunity, there is a need. I'll tell you the example. The first step one should be kickstart the stalled and delayed central projects. What is meant by this? You must be aware that there are central government projects like, our Polavaram project and what you call this bullet train project. There are so many projects across the country in various states that are funded by the central government. They are known as central government projects. In fact, right from the year 2012, every quarterly basis, government is taking the data of these major projects across the country, and if there are delays in implementation, that comes under the category of delayed and stalled projects. And in the central government, you have got a ministry, as I told you, Ministry of Statistics and Project Implementation. This ministry, every quarterly, they submitted data to the parliament of the data on the stalled and delayed projects. Incidentally, in 2012, the data says, because of the delay in execution of these all central government projects, there is a cost increase. Only the cost increase component alone in 2012 was 50,000 crores. But currently, the situation is very alarming. We have around 1,405 projects, central government projects all over the country. Some are irrigation projects, some are railway projects, some are seaport projects, some are road projects, some are power projects, so many projects. Put together 1,405 projects across the country, where original investment was around 18 lakh crore. Because of the delay in completion of the project, there is an increase in the cost. The escalation cost alone is 3.3 lakh crore, and all these projects currently are standstill. Therefore, what the government can do, step one is that because the corporates are not now going to produce more, MSMEs, they have their own problems. So somebody has to kickstart the economy. That is what we say in popularly in the slang language. Somebody has to bell the cat. Government has to bell the cat. And government has the cat and also the bell in hand. So what the government should do, government should pump more money into these projects, identify the projects. Some of them are in advanced stage of completion. So they can identify those projects and pump in more money. Then what will happen? These projects will again restart. When this project restart, it will give more employment, particularly the construction projects. You get the construction workers, contract labor, daily wages people, and also the migrant workers. They will get jobs. These are all government projects. So when they are doing this activity, when they get the jobs, they will get more money in their hands. Then that will lead to more demand and also more employment. And then as a spin-off benefit, what will happen? These construction projects, when they are kick-started, there will be simultaneously demand for steel, cement and other construction materials. Therefore, the cement industry, steel industry, other construction material industries like tippers, tractors and all, tractors and all, those companies will start producing more because there is more demand. So this will have a positive multiplier effect. It will slowly spread to other sectors also. Then that will create more jobs and more production in these sectors. This process may take 3 to 6 months time. And by that time, what will happen? Then slowly the housing sector, truck manufacturing, construction machinery manufacturing, these sectors also will pick up. So from 6 months to 9 months period, if this step one is initiated, that will lead to some economic activity happening across the country and slowly increasing. Then we will come to step two. What the government also should do now is that the government should, through the public distribution system, stop the leakages and plug the delay in distribution of the farming produce. Government should totally take over this infrastructure and logistics and ensure that there is a free movement of the agricultural produce from the land or from the agricultural fields to the market. This is what these two steps government has to do. Nobody else can do. And currently, if the government does this by eliminating the middleman, this is the right opportunity, then the farmers will get remunerative produce for their activity. These are the two important steps we have to do to kickstart the economy. And then we'll come to step three. Then when these two things happen, maybe in 6 to 9 months time, then slowly demand also will be picking up. Only then MSMEs also will have a scope to produce more. Now government has given some relaxation to the MSME loans. They said that you need not repay the existing loans for 6 months time. And also government in the 20 lakh crore package, they have announced a separate package for 3 lakh crores exclusively to MSME sector. What is this? Government now, the banks can give additional 3 lakh crore as additional loan to the MSMEs. And one interesting thing in this loan is that banks will not insist for any collateral. They are collateral free loans. This is like an emergency measure. So this is the step 3. Overnight it will not take, because even today bank says I'll give you money, loan you take. No MSME will take because there is no market activity. So how will the market activity happen? As I said, step 1 and step 2 only government has to do. But unfortunately, let me tell you, there is not much attention or focus paid on the step 1 and step 2, and we are starting our focus from step 3 onwards, which is not going to materialize in the immediate future. Therefore, this is a matter of concern for us. And then we come to the step 4. In the step 4, another burning issue, unfortunately, government has missed it. The government should have a dialogue with the industry and find a solution to the migrant workers and our workers. Currently, everybody is silent about during the lockdown period, who will pay the wages. Originally, governments passed a GO saying that you have to pay the wages. Now, government has withdrawn that GO. I don't know how many of you are aware. 1 week back, government has withdrawn the GO because the matter is lying with the Supreme Court. Therefore, the employers will not pay the wages to the lockdown period. Employers will be suffering. Most of the migrant workers have left their cities and gone to the villages because they are not getting their salaries, no work, no pay. So this problem has to be resolved, and this is a burning issue. And then the step 5 will be, unfortunately, we have not focused more. There is a huge potential in the healthcare sector post-COVID, because every problem comes with an opportunity. What is the problem in the COVID? Shortage of hospitals, shortage of doctors, shortage of personal protection equipment, shortage of ventilators. This infrastructure shortage was one of the issues which had prompted the government to go for the lockdown, because they knew pretty well if this disease spreads, we don't have adequate hospitals and doctors to tackle the issue. Therefore, if you look at the post-COVID, what had happened, many corporates have come forward, like Mahindra Group, they said we will start manufacturing the ventilators. And then the Tata Group, they have come forward. And even the Maruti Group, they have come forward. Maruti Motors, they said we will manufacture the ventilators in the healthcare sector. Actually, this is a huge opportunity because there is a demand, there is a need, there is a medical crisis, there is a shortage in the supply side. Therefore, government should have come with a proper healthcare policy to attract capital investment. According to my estimate, there is a minimum 1 lakh crore opportunity for investment in the healthcare sector. But that will happen only when there is a proper policy guidelines framed by the government. Unfortunately, government is silent on this. Now, globally also, if you look at it, not only India, all countries are facing the problem. We are all sailing the same boat in the COVID ocean. UK, interestingly, let me say, I don't know how many of you are aware, in UK, the government is planning to issue bonds to raise money. But normally when the government is raising bonds, they will pay interest, But here the government says, I will not pay interest. It is a negative interest bond. What does it mean? If I am an investor, I invest 100 rupees, I will get 98 rupees back. I will lose 2 rupees. That is a negative interest. Now, it is a debatable question whether the negative interest bond being proposed by the UK government will be implemented, and what will be the market response. But the government strongly believes there are some large corporates and investors who have got a lot of funds, and they don't want to risk their funds by investing and losing the funds, because currently if you invest somewhere, you may lose the money. Therefore, here what the government says, I will guarantee you, you pay me 2% as a fee. You invest 100, I will give you back 98, negative interest bond. And UK is not the only government. In fact, some of you must be also aware, in Japan for the past so many years, banks continue to levy a fee on a deposit. That is, say if I deposit money in my savings bank, in a bank in Japan, and I don't withdraw for a longer period, I keep it as it is, then they levy a fee. Why? Because in Japan, the government and the banks, they are compelling the people to spend. Japan, the problem is something peculiar. That is, people, they do not want to spend, they are saving more. The economy is into recession even before COVID. So you have two examples where the government in UK, they are planning to come with the negative interest bonds. And in Japan, already you have where in the deposits, there is a fee levied by the banking system. So something in the global scenario is happening. Now coming to the Indian context, what we have done before COVID, we have done consolidation of the banks. Some of the nationalized banks are merged. As you are aware, currently we have got 12 public sector banks. Now the point is whether consolidation of the banks will help the banking system to recover and come back to the track. It may not. because only the number has decreased from 29 to 12, but the problems remain. The problem in the economy, when they are continue to remain, consolidation of the banks may not be finding an immediate solution. Probably you will have a better synergies within the banking system. That alone will be, if you are able to have some benefit. But beyond that, it is a moot question. Now, what will be the roadmap for the banks? For you, some of you, most of you are students and academicians. Let me share with you the future probable scenario in the Indian banking sector. What is likely to happen? I can say with confidence is that we are introducing the blockchain technology. This will address the technology frauds. You remember earlier slides I showed you, 22 lakh crores frauds have taken place 2018. So when we are going to this blockchain technology, the technology frauds can be prevented because the blockchain is a very tested mechanism where it is next to impossible to what you call hack the system. We have already done testing. We are ready to implement it. We are waiting for the government of India guidelines. Even RBI is ready. We are waiting for the government to give policy guidelines. It may come anytime in the next 3 to 6 months. Then all banks will go to this blockchain technology platform. Then probably the day will come where the technology frauds will be reduced to almost zero. And then the next emerging scenarios, because the post-COVID, what we have realized is that banking sector and IT sector, these are the two sectors where we were able to function through remote location, working through remote location or work from home, because we are all technology driven. So we will be definitely taking forward these technology initiatives post-COVID, so that because this COVID may lead to a few more what we call deadly diseases also, which are likely to happen at frequent intervals. Having learned the lesson and we know what is the solution for it, we are definitely going ahead with predictive analytics. What is the predictive analytics? Like with the data I have, I will do what you call forecasting through predictive analytics, and then I will be able to map the behavioral patterns of the borrowers. Sitting in my desk with the data analytics, I can identify the borrowers who are likely to turn troublesome or problematic borrowers or fraudsters. I need not go and visit the borrower to find out. Through this predictive analytics, banks will be able to find in advance the alarming symptoms in the likely borrowers who are likely to become bad or who can turn into troublesome borrowers, problematic borrowers or fraudulent borrowers. All these symptoms in advance through the predictive analytics, I will be able to find, and I'll be able to take effective steps to check that. That is, supposing I find a borrower will be likely to commit a fraud. I know that. Then what I will do? First thing, I will impound his passport so that he will not be another Nirav Modi or Vijay Mallya. So these are the steps the banking sector likely to initiate. And we will be doing a big data analytics. Social profiling of the customers is going to happen so that we know the behavioral patterns of the people, whether they are spendthrifts, whether they spend lavishly or whether they are conservative. And all this behavioral pattern of the people, social profiling also we will be able to do through this technology. And we'll be using more and more robotics and artificial intelligence so that the dependence of the banks on the people will come down. But at the same time, the people who the banks will recruit, they all will be like, you know, thought leaders, as I say, because they will use the technology, do all these activities, and then try to arrive at decision making. Because technology cannot do the decision by itself. It will give you a decision support system and the inputs, and the people have to take the decisions. What are technologies there? Therefore, in the future, the role of the people who work in the banks will be very critical in the sense they will not only operate with the technology, they will have to take crucial decisions, credit decisions, or tracking the willful defaulters and tracking them and doing taking effective steps. So these are the steps that are going to happen in the future. Now I will also finally share with you from the customer perspective, from the common man perspective, This will be my final part of my presentation. Currently, many people, at the back of the mind, what will be the concern? Whether the banks are safe. A straight question. Because in the recent past, we have seen Yes Bank has gone into problem. And you know that Punjab and Maharashtra Cooperative Bank has gone into problem. Several banks, many cooperative banks have closed down. So whether the money of the people with the bank is safe or not, that is a big question. Now let me answer this point through the current regulatory mechanism and with the facts. As I said earlier, every 100 rupees deposit in the bank will not lend the entire 100 rupees because 3% they will keep in CRR, 18.5% in SLR. So these two funds are safe. Any day out of 100 rupees, bank will be able to pay you back, you know, that 21.5% anytime because that is invested safely. The problem comes only with that 78.5%, which banks are giving to the corporate sector or industries or retail sector, home loans, whatever it is, personal loans. So out of every 100 rupees, banks give loan a net amount of 78.5 only. Now, currently, some of you must be aware, bank deposits are insured. We have got a separate insurance, DICGC, Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation. But the problem with that insurance is that every depositor is insured only up to maximum amount of 1 lakh rupees. What does it mean? I'll give you 3 examples. Say depositor A, who has got 50,000 rupees deposit. Because up to 1 lakh rupees deposit is insured, if that bank goes into problem, he will get back his 50,000 rupees because up to 1 lakh it is insured, totally insured. Now the depositor B, second depositor, who has insured 1 lakh, he too will get the full money back. Now the depositor C, the third depositor, if he has deposited 10 lakhs, will he get 10 lakhs back? No. He will get 1 lakh immediately. The remaining 9 lakhs, he will get depending upon how much money bank is able to recover from the loans. That is the 78.5. If the bank is able to recover only 50%, then probably the balance 9 lakh rupees, he will get only 4.5 lakhs. That is the current scenario applicable to all banks. That is whether you are depositing your money with the state bank or with, you know, a foreign bank or a private bank, any bank, this is the current scenario. So deposits are issued only for 1 lakh rupee, and beyond that, if the bank, now the problem will come only when the bank is going into trouble. The bank is not having adequate money to pay back. Then this problem will come. Now therefore, in fact, I have also suggested to the ministry and the government, we are putting the cart before the horse. What is that? We are talking about depositors insurance. No, we should go for insurance of the bank loans. Because if the bank loans are insured to the banks and the loan I give to the borrower is safe, even if he does not pay, I get my money back, then automatically the depositor's money will be safe. So this is what has to happen as a what you call a reform measure in the banking sector. The government and the RBI, they need to look at it because we have got the data in the recent past. PMC Bank, Yes Bank, several cooperative banks have gone into liquidation. Because as I said earlier, cooperative banks are not totally under the control of RBI. So it is very difficult for RBI to control these banks. Therefore, these banks are frequently going into what you call insolvency. Now, let me also share with you, when I said the bank loans has to be insured, currently we have got partial insurance for the bank loans. What is that partial insurance? Like for the MSME sector, when I say MSME sector, micro, small and medium enterprises, we have got the Mudra loans and other small and medium loans. We give to the MSME sector up to, you know, up to 2 crores. There is a scheme in the banks where they can go for an insurance for these loans, but not all banks have availed this insurance. Similarly, for the farmer loans also, banks can have an insurance, Agricultural Insurance Corporation one entity is there. So all farming loans we can insure it. But these two form a very not a significant portion of the total bank loans. As I said earlier, corporate loans are the major loan component of the total bank loans. The number of borrowers will be less, but the amount of loans will be more. Unfortunately, for the corporate loans, we don't have any loan insurance. Therefore, we need to think about having a loan insurance for the large corporates also, like in USA. And then when all the loans are insured, then automatically the bank depositors' money will be by default insured. And there is no need for the banks to go for the depositors' insurance separately. This is what I am proposing. And as I said, NPS category wise, my statement I am trying to back with the data. NPAs, most of the major bad loans, industries, and these industry loans are not insured. Agriculture and the MSME sector, they are insured, but their contribution in non-performing asset is not very significant unless and until we find a mechanism to have an insurance for the large corporate loans given by the banking sector. You cannot expect total 100% protection to the bank depositors. That is the reality we have to face. I am not, trying to sound negative, but I am telling you the factual position. And at the same time, let me also assure you categorically that not every bank will fail. And even if such a scenario arises, RBI and Government of India will not totally let down the banking system, because if the banking system is let down, the economy will totally collapse. Therefore, in their own interest, both RBI and Government of India will try to pump oxygen or put the banking system into the ventilator system. Therefore, bank deposits are, though there is a risk element is there, it is not totally risk. A certain level of comfort is also there. Now, the future trend in the banking sector, what I can tell you confidently, apart from the technology initiatives, the other one which is going to happen, I'll another couple of slides, kindly bear with me. Focused banking approach. That is, this is now going to be the way forward. Probably after between 5 to 10 years, we'll be finding a transformation in the banking system. You'll be having rural cooperative banks, regional rural banks, payment banks are there, like Bandhan. These are all the small payment banks, microfinance companies, and local or regional banks. They will be exclusively operating in their locality only, and they will confine to lending to agriculture and micro and small and medium enterprises. This is going to happen between 5 to 10 years time, which means these banks will not be allowed to lend more to the large corporates. Why I am saying will not be allowed to lend? Because if a small bank is lending to a large corporate a big amount, and that corporate is into problem, the bank will go into problem. That is what has happened precisely in the PMC bank. So now, in the next 5 to 10 years, this is what is going to happen. There will be restrictions on the bank's lending portfolio also, depending upon their presence, depending upon their what you call activity, depending upon their location. Whereas banks with global presence, like we have got the 12 banks are there in the PSB sector. Out of these 12 banks, maybe 8 to 9 banks, they will be national players. And within these 12 banks, there are 2-3 banks, they are international players, like State Bank of India is an international player. Similarly, in the private sector, you have got HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Axis Bank. These 4 to 5 banks will be international players. Then others will be leading national players. So the national players will be allowed to lend to large corporates. International players will be allowed to lend foreign loans also. And the other players will be allowed to lend, but only to local, small and medium enterprises and rural advances. Depending upon the geographical presence, the lending portfolio of the banks also will be decided. This is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, so that the all banks taking huge risk can be avoided. That is what is going to happen. Now currently what is happening is that we find that on one side, some 10 to 12 large borrowers, they make a fraud worth 1 lakh crore. They run away. We are not able to catch them. Whereas MSME sector and agricultural sector, probably even if 50,000 crore loan is there overdue, there will be some 2 lakh, 3 lakh borrowers. Many people, but the amount is small. But unfortunately, currently, how the banks are functioning is that we are very careful, extra careful when it comes to agriculturalist and MSME loans. We take 110 documents and we many times delay the process of giving the loan to them. But whereas when it comes to large corporates, they're all white collar criminals, most of them. I'm not generalizing the statement. Most of them who have come with the intention to make a fraud and run away, and they get away. This is the system currently we have. It is happening here because, as I said earlier, every bank was doing everything. Now, probably slowly down the line, when the lending activity of the bank is linked with the geographical presence, this scenario will change, and then probably we'll be having more quality lending in our portfolio. Now, friends, let me also conclude finally saying that what are the lessons we have to learn? Lessons we have to learn as a student and also as a what you call academician, as a teacher, or as a common man also. There are three important things. That is, we have to keep on learning new things. That is number one. At the same time, once you enter from the college to the industry, sometimes you have to do some unlearning also. What is that unlearning? Like, there is a statement in economics which says if the banks increase the interest rates, they will have more deposits. And then because of increasing interest rate on loans, the advances will come down. But in reality, it may not happen. How? Let me give an example now. A reverse scenario, that is, banks are reducing the interest rates. Why banks are reducing interest rates? Because RBI feels that if you reduce the interest rates, industry will borrow more. But is it really happening? No. If you look at the last 2 years, almost 2.5%, there is a reduction in the interest rate by RBI to banks, whether it is through what you call bank rate or CRR, SLR, or repo, reverse repo, all these rates, whatever you take, almost 2.5% rate reduction has happened. But did it really result into corporates borrowing more? No. So the learning we have in the academics sometimes may not happen in practice. Therefore, we also have to do some unlearning. The reason being, I am not belittling the academic. What I am meaning to say is that in academics, all economics also, the law has some assumption, ceteris paribus. So when the assumption is not working in the real life situation, the theory will not operate. Therefore, the theory what you have studied so far, when the interest rates are reduced, banks will be having a rush of borrowers who will come and borrow more. It is not happening the last 2 years because this problem is not related with the interest rates. This problem is fundamentally related to the economy. What is the fundamental problem in the economy? As we have dwelt at length, declining GDP growth, increasing unemployment. Now we have come to negative GDP probably, and unemployment will be more. This is a fundamental problem. Therefore, a different learning has to take place. A different learning, relearning will take place only when some dogmatic theories we have studied, we feel it is not working, we will have a new theory in place. So learning simultaneously, you have to unlearn something when you go to the field, and again you have to relearn. What is that relearning? Like you join in a bank, you are working in a bank for 2-3 years. Now you have to relearn something. Again go back, learn something because technology. So somebody has to do some course in the technology, how to operate a blockchain, a different module, different package. So again, we have to relearn. Therefore, I feel that learning, unlearning, relearning should happen simultaneously, and this is equally applicable to everyone, not only to the student, everyone. Only then, we'll be able to align ourselves to the ground reality, unlearn the things what is not required, learn the things that are required, and go back and learn something which is also required. So friends, with this few thoughts from my side. I would like to conclude my presentation, and I leave the floor open for any questions or any doubts. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Any questions? I'll be glad.
Participants have any questions? You can please put them in chat. So there is one question, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
What is the fate of mutual fund investors in the post-COVID-19 scenario? It's by Satyanarayana Rao, sir, our secretary.
Sir, Satyanarayana Rao garu. Namaskaram andi. My view is that you have to just forget about it for next 3 years, because the market value, NAV, net asset value and all, they are in the decline. All industries portfolio will be negative. So it is not the time to take it back, because having invested, we have to take some more time, be patient for 2-3 years. I am talking about those who have already invested. You have to wait. And for the people who want to invest, some experts say this is the right time to enter, because you will be entering when the market value is low. So you will invest now, and after 2-3 years when you wait, you will get higher returns. But this is not the time to exit. Probably this is the time to enter.
There is one more question, sir. How the economy will get back to the normality in India?
Yeah. See, as I said, kindly go through the 5 steps I have mentioned. In my strong view, that is the only solution. Because let me be very frank, government has announced a package, but nothing on ground, and nothing is going to come immediate relief. It is all midterm and long term. And government says no free lunch, fine. But how to solve the problem now? To solve the problem now, government has to take the first step. Unless it does that, I am afraid we will be complicating the problems in the economy. Because as I said, the fundamental problem in the economy is declining GDP and increasing unemployment.
Okay, sir. There is one more.
Declining demand. Demand is reducing, unemployment is increasing. It simply states that people are producing less and there is more retrenchment. So unemployment is increasing. Why people are producing less? Because there is no demand. Why there is no demand or demand is coming down? Because again recession and unemployment. Because the demand is decided by the purchasing power of the people. When I say the purchasing power of the people, please remember it is the people below the poverty line, people above the poverty line and still poor, and lower middle class and upper middle class. These are the 5 segments of the people in the country who will decide the demand. And unless these 5 segments of the country, they are having employment, you cannot get demand. How do they get the employment? Somebody has to give the job. Who will give job? MSME will not give job. They are into problem. Corporates will not give job. On the other side, they will reduce the production and go for retrenchment. So who has to give job? Government has to give job. How? There are projects, as I have said. Unless the government realizes this and takes the first initiative and create a positive climate in the economy, MSME and corporate sector cannot find a support to enter the ocean. That is the problem.
There is one more question, sir. Yeah. For moratorium, you need to pay extra interest or not? Is the burden with moratorium?
Sorry?
1 second.
Moratorium?
For moratorium, need to pay extra interest or not?
Yeah. Let me answer like this. Effectively, you will be paying more. That is, say, for example, your EMI today is now 2,500 per month. Another 20 installments you have. Now, what it says, 6 months you need not pay. So, 6 months installments, 2,500 into 6. That 15,000 rupees, what happens? You are not paying in these 6 months. So, that 15,000 rupees will get added to the outstanding loan. And every month during the 6 months, interest on interest will be added. And that entire amount will be again decided in the EMI. Therefore, what happens in last stages when you pay, the amount will be more because interest on interest is added in the EMI. So you'll be ending up paying more. That is why I made a suggestion very clearly to the people. This is an option given to you, which means if you are not in a position to pay, use it, but you are paying a tax on it. It means if you have money, don't avail this. You better pay it off. You are not getting any benefit out of it. You are only postponing the repayment, and by virtue of postponing the repayment, for the 6 months postponement on this, interest will be added. That interest also you are going to pay. Therefore, effectively you will be paying more.
Okay, sir. Then is it right time to waive the corporate loan amount?
Sorry?
Is it right time to waive the corporate loan amount?
Right time to
Waive off.
take corporate loan. See,
No, sir. Waive it off.
waive it off.
Yes.
See, I don't say waiver. Corporate loans, government so far has not given any commitment. The government has given official commitment for not waiver. For MSME also deferment. Please remember this, deferment. That is, you have got a respite. 6 months moratorium. Government has not used the word waiver. RBI is also not using the word waiver. Let me make very clear to all of you, government or RBI, they are not going to give any waiver. They are not going to write off anything officially. They will only give more time for the people to recover and pay back. If the people are not able to pay and the bank goes to IBC, the resolution happens, then that is a one-time settlement, that is a different thing. But on their own, either government or RBI, they are not going to say we are going to waive. They are not going to say that.
Next question is this the right time to enter into investing?
The investment, yes. In a way, if you have a good consultant in the capital market, you can either enter directly or through mutual funds. This is the right time to invest because now the economy is now almost the lowest ebb, and we have almost reached the bottom. Therefore, it will slowly start improving only. Definitely after 1 year, it will improve. So somebody is taking a long-term view like 5 years. This is the right time to invest, but he has to be patient. You cannot get overnight returns. Bear for 1 or 2 years, then you see the symptoms, improving symptoms, then you take a call. If I'm happy with 20% growth in the investment after 3 years, take the 20% and come out. Or I'm a long-term investor, wait for some more time, wait for 5 years, you'll get very good return. That is definitely, you need to have a long-term view. If you are taking a short-term view within 1 year, I want to get some return, no, you will not get anything. Maybe you will get a negative return in 1 year.
Next question is, how can we address the jobless and unorganized labor problems arising due to this pandemic situation? How can we address the jobless
sector and labor problem and then
arising due to the pandemic situation?
Yeah.
Unorganized labor and jobless.
Yeah, very good question. I have to answer at length. You have to bear with me. When we say the joblessness happens in both organized sector and also unorganized sector. But now let us confine to unorganized sector because the problem is more acute. In the unorganized sector, there are more than 18 to 20 crore people in the total unorganized sector. And out of that, in MSME alone, you have almost 11 lakh crore people are employed. So in the unorganized sector, the problem is that in the post-COVID, they are the most affected, as we all know, because they said no work, no pay. So joblessness has increased. In the unorganized sector, again, you have got contract labor. And then you have got daily wages people. And also you have migrant workers. These are the 3 segments, so please remember. Contract labor, who is on contract, that is a contractor will come, he will bring the labor. I am not having any responsibility. I will pay the contractor, he will pay them. This happens in the construction industry also, as you are aware. Then daily wages people. Like, I require sometimes the factories, during a particular period, there is a huge demand, produce more, a big order has come. So I will recruit some daily wage people, pay them, and then once the peak demand is over, I will say you need not come. That is the daily wages people. Then the third problem is migrant wages. Unfortunately, the migrant wages problem is a very sensitive and a sad thing. And every citizen in the country, according to me, we have to take a very empathetic view. Because unlike the contract labor and the daily wages labor, the migrant labor belongs to a totally different category where they have come from far off places. Like, you know, the states where people come, UP, Bihar, Orissa, Madhya Pradesh. These are the 4 major states where, because of shortage of employment there, many people from those states have gone to states like Maharashtra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka. And the interesting trend you find in the last 10 years, studies have revealed, before 10 years, the people who came from those places, they were all, semi-skilled, unskilled labor people. Whereas in the last 10 years, more people have started going to Karnataka and Maharashtra and some of the places where they are working in the IT industry as migrant labor, doing miscellaneous and other services. Now all these people have lost their jobs. Okay. Now what should be the solution? The solution is, it's written on the wall. It is, first thing is that we have to pay their salary for the last 2 months. If you do not pay the salaries for the last 2 months, they are running into deep problems, financial problems, because they all live with hand to mouth existence. And they are not in a position to borrow also, because who will give them? Particularly migrant laborers, they have come from other city, other town or other state. So who will give them loan? Nobody will give. That is the main reason why these people have started walking down to their places. It is a very sad state of affair. We all have to feel very sorry about it. Therefore, the solution lies only with the government and the industry. When I say the industry, let me tell you very clearly, MSME, they have represented to the government, because I am part of the deliberations. I know I am a consultant to the National Institute of MSME. I know some inside information also. Something I will share with you which is relevant and pertinent, not beyond that. MSME sector has already represented to the ministry 2 months back, saying that we cannot pay the salary because under lockdown we don't have money. Therefore, some solution has to be found. Unfortunately, government did not give a solution. Government only said they will pay that ESI contribution, that 12.5% PPF. Fine, but what about the salary? Everybody is silent. That is why government passed a due at the time saying that you have to pay. But now government has realized it, nobody will be in a position to pay, and government is also silent. This is something unfortunate. Unless and until this last 2 years, last 2 months, their salary dues are settled amicably. How that can happen? Government and the industry has to come to a dialogue and say, I will pay part of the amount, you will pay part of the amount, and you pay the total 2 months wages. Only then, when the lockdown is lifted and the production starts, these people will come back. I'm talking about the migrant labor. They have gone back to their hometowns, bleeding in their hearts. Many of them, mark my words, they are not going to come back. Therefore, we'll be having a huge problem after lockdown is lifted, because there will be shortage of the people to work, particularly in the infrastructure industry. How do you solve this problem? Only through a humanitarian approach. For 2 months lockdown period or 3 months lockdown period, government, both the state and the central government and the industry, all together they have to pool through some innovative way, raise the money. I will tell you a simple way. You have got the PPF, pension funds are there, and the pension funds are lying with the government. They have made a lot of investment. They made a profit. A portion of the profit they can pay towards the salary of these people by passing a legislative measures, or through a special package, government can announce it and pay that. Unless that is happening, this problem will continue. Then what is the solution? If the government is not paying it, then after the lockdown is lifted, then people cannot continue without employment. Therefore, when the industry start working again, they will slowly start recruiting the people only to the extent required. Then it will be a very long-term game. That is, if the government is not helping, the industry on their own, they have to raise on their feet and then stand and then start running. Then this problem resolution will take minimum 1 to 1.5 years. And that is a long-drawn, painful process. That is why we have to give a symbolic and humanitarian approach by paying their wages or salary for the 2 months, and that is possible only for the government. But unfortunately, as the things indicate, government is not willing to pay anything from its coffers. So that is going to be a painful process, and we have to live with this problem. It is very unfortunate, let me tell you.
Next question is, why government is not ensuring corporate and industry loans?
It is not the government. Basically, I have skipped that point to discuss at length. Now, let me deal with it. The banks themselves did not want. Before 1991, we have insured some of the loans under DACGC at that time. But our experience as a banker was, when some loans went bad, we went to that insurance company to get back that insurance. Our experience says there a lot of delay, they don't settle the claim, and even if they settle, they pay only 40–50%. So we banks, we decided we are paying a huge premium and we are not getting the recovery when they go bad. So on our own RBI and banking system, we decided that we will not go for insurance of the loans. We will take the what you call the loss on our balance sheet. So now there should be a rethinking based on the emerging scenario. Now the banks and RBI have to take this proposal to the government, convince the government, then the government will be definitely coming with a scheme to insure the large corporates. Now the ball is in the bank's court to take an initiative on this.
The next question is, what will be the position of startups?
Now I tell you, startups, there are two categories. The startups with innovative ideas, which does not require much of investment. And they will be able to find a huge market. Good idea with less investment scope. Whereas if a startup is coming with a big investment scope, where the idea can be materialized only with a big financial support, then they have to wait. I'll give an example here. Like, you know, as you are aware, automobile industry, currently we are using the fossil fuel like diesel, gas, petrol and all. Now, as you are aware, in the next 2–3 years, we are going for electric vehicles. Now, when you go for the electric vehicles, what about the fate of the existing vehicles? They all have to be discarded. When you dump it and buy the new vehicle, all these old vehicles have to be sold as scrap. And that will be a big problem for the environmental issues. There is a startup in Hyderabad. I do not know how many of you are aware, IITs. 3 IITs who have studied in IIT Chennai, they are from Hyderabad. They have started an innovative idea where they will be in a position to convert the existing vehicle to electric vehicle with an investment of 3 to 4 lakh crores. The idea is good, but who will do that investment? They have to find a finance for it. So there are two categories in the startup. A startup with a very good idea with less investment, they will have very good potential. Whereas a startup with a good idea but huge investment funds are required, then they have to wait for some time because the economy is yet to stabilize.
Then we'll have the last question of the session. What is the future of investing in gold bonds?
Gold bonds, I do not know how many of you are aware. I have recommended to the government the current bond what we have, what you call the gold monetization scheme, where you deposit your gold in the bank, they will give a certificate. Maybe you take a certificate for 3 years and 5 years, and then after 3 to 5 years, you go to the bank, they will give you the equal to the gold you have deposited, either the equal gold or rupee money back. I think that is what the question is meant about it, if I am right. Am I right?
I don't have an idea. So there is one more question from our secretary.
No. This question, let me answer that. Gold bond, there are two categories.
Okay.
One category is that you deposit the gold, that is a gold monetization scheme. The other one is gold bond, where you can invest and buy the gold. Which one they are talking about?
I don't know who has asked this question.
Sorry?
They have just asked the question. I don't have an idea, sir. They didn't mention anything specifically.
Okay, fine.
Then there is one last question from our secretary, sir. He is asking you about helicopter finance.
Sir, the helicopter finance, as you know, our CM was proposing. He said, in a way, I don't find fault with him. Because I tell you, if you look at the current problem, sir, we have got 1 year surplus of food stock in the godowns of the government FCI, and farmers, the production crop has come good, but they are not able to push the crop in the market. And the other side, you have got many people who are now currently thrown on the roads of unemployment. They don't have money. They don't have money to buy the food. So you got a food available for 1 year, surplus food. So what some economists like, Amartya Sen and, even our Raghuram Rajan and others they suggested is that government, instead of keeping this food idle in the godowns and getting it rotten, you can simply supply free, distribute free to the people during this crisis. That also comes under helicopter money, because the money, what our CM meant was literally giving money to buy. When you give money to buy, there should be what you call goods available. Now, when we talk about that, already excess food stock is available, and the people who want this food supply, they are all poor people who don't have money. So instead of giving them money and asking them to buy the food, the other easy way is that you straight away supply that excess food to these people. That is one way of looking at it. But the other argument is that just you give food, that alone is not enough, because we need to buy so many things. That is why we require money also. So the other way of dealing with the problem is that a practical way out, which I was also advocating, is that instead of doing all these things, you please ensure that during the lockdown period, the people are paid their wages. That's all. Once you do that, automatically the problem gets solved. Whatever terminology you use, if you ensure that during the lockdown period, the people's wages are paid, automatically the money is solved.
Sir, they are asking getting either gold bonds encashment or in gold for the previous question.
Yeah. There are two schemes. If you go for the gold monetization scheme, you have to deposit the gold, and then at the end of the maturity, you will get back equivalent gold. But the point here is that you will not get the original gold what you have deposited. Suppose you have deposited an ornament, a wedding ring you have put there, diamond ring. After maturity, you will not get it back, because what government will do, they are going to melt all this gold and supply this to jewelers. Why they are doing it? Because the jewelers, they import gold from abroad. So government wanted to reduce the import of gold. The reason being, in our country, it is estimated that anywhere between 20 to 22,000 tons of gold is lying idle with the people. So government thought through this gold monetization scheme, they will get all the gold from the people, melt it and supply it. Supply means they will sell it to the jewelers. So they will not import the gold, they will buy locally. And on maturity, you will get the equivalent of gold. That is, say, for example, today you are given half kg gold. After 5 years, you have the option to get half kg gold, but not in the ornament. Some raw gold you will get, or that half kg gold equivalent rupee at that time you will get. Now the other one is the gold bond, where you buy the coins and keep it. You invest in the bond. You get the gold, equivalent to gold. It is a reverse mechanism. Now, what I feel is that currently the gold bond scheme is better than the gold monetization scheme, because now in the short term, maybe my view is that during the 6 months to 1 year, gold value may appreciate. I am not an expert, but let me tell you, the reason is simple. I tell you, because all over the world, oil prices have come down because of the recession. Normally, if you look at when the oil prices come down, gold prices increase, because the investors, instead of investing in oil, they will invest in gold. And real estate also prices have come down due to global recession. Therefore, gold will be probably in the next 1 year will be a very good bet for an asset, a short-term investment. Again, once the routine economy picks up, the gold yield will come down. So gold may be a good investment. You need to consult a domain expert and then probably take a call.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Let me end the session.